future historians, welcome to week 2 of analyzing maps. We're going to be working on honing our map skills. I know last week you focused on Virginia, but this week we're going to focus on analyzing maps of the United States and really digging deep into the geographical features of the US. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. All right, so this week we're taking a dive into historical skills and thinking. And what will you need for today? Well, you will need a notebook, a pencil, your thinking caps, your smiles, and your willingness to learn. So our goal is to examine the geographic features of the United States. And if you notice, this is a map of the United States. But if you look kind of closely at the bottom, what have they done? Well, they've inserted 2 states that we can't really capture in this picture because they are not part of the mainland of the United States. So we're including all 50 of the states, but this is Alaska and Hawaii. If we look at a broader map of the world, you'll see that Alaska is actually up here, part of the United States, and Hawaii is actually right out here in the Pacific Ocean. So that's kind of the difference. But what we're going to do today is we're going to not only examine the geographical features of the United States, but we're also going to be looking at how maps have changed over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with this video. And in the video, we're going to be able to discuss and learn about some of the important vocabulary that we're going to need in order to be successful at this week's activities. So I'll get started. And if you want to, a great thing to do right now would be to take notes, to write down any important vocabulary words that you hear and maybe any definitions that correspond with those vocabulary words. So let's get started.
You want to be a geophysicist, huh?
Yeah!
You're gonna need to learn your landforms and your bodies of water.
Well, I know I'm just an intern, but I'm ready to learn.
Let's go.
There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms. Here, let me explain. There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms. Here, let me explain.
Listen here, if you're trying to get a lay of the land, there's a few terms you'll need to understand.
Okay.
And there's a whole lot, there's no time to chill.
What's that land sticking up over there?
That's a hill.
I knew that.
Right, and its top is round, it's not that tall. You might have some fun going down.
Whoa!
But not on a mountain. That's land that's way taller than its surroundings.
And its sides are steep.
And when you climb to the top, you reach the peak. And when they connect, it's a range.
But what's the piece of land sticking up looking strange?
Oh, you didn't know? That's a plateau. It's big and high, but its top is flat though.
And what's that below?
Down there is a valley. That's the
A
lowland.
Death Valley out in Cali?
Yup, a deep valley is called a canyon, and they're formed when water erodes the land. Erosion, when water carries rock away, little by little and day after day. It could be an ocean or a river, no doubt. Rivers start at the source and they end at the mouth.
Now how about those big chunks of ice that stay frozen?
Those are glaciers, and they also cause erosion. Plus, when they melt, they can form a lake. Water that's surrounded by land, and some are great. Get it? Next, have you heard of an island?
Yeah, that's land with water on all sides, man.
Right, and the thing about those is they can be formed by volcanoes, openings in the earth, and they're usually raised. But watch out, that's where gas and hot lava escape.
There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms. Here, let me explain. There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms. Here, let me explain.
Back on land, we're on the plains, broad, flat areas.
Great for growing grains.
That's true, and when the plain is grassy, you can call that a prairie if you want to get classy.
Okay, but what's that water with land on 3 sides?
That's a bay, and let me say, they're great for boat rides.
Right.
And while I'm here convincing you the opposite of a bay would be a peninsula. That's land surrounded on 3 sides by water.
Oh, I know an example, the state of Florida.
Yup, but we still got a lot on the plate.
What?
That narrow body of water over there is a strait.
Okay.
It connects 2 bodies that are larger.
Oh, do you mean like the Strait of Gibraltar?
Yup, and here's something you will probably see the most. Any land that meets the ocean
Is the coast.
Right, but there's still many more terms to learn.
I'll tell you what I see, sir. It's my turn.
There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms here, let me explain. There are landforms that go from high to low. Around those is where bodies of water flow through valleys, down mountains and over plains. Learn your landforms here, let me explain.
All right. So in that video, I heard a lot of definitions to some of the words that we're going to be using and delving deeper into this week. But I also wanted to point out that this is a resource that Richmond Public Schools has that you can use. So if you want to extend your learning about these different geographical features, you can actually go in through Clever. You can see some pictures and examples, and the vocabulary is actually included. There is a vocab game. There's even a place where you can actually make up your own songs. There's lyric lab, there's quizzes. So there's a lot of fun stuff. So as much as possible, I would use this if I wanted to learn about different things, and especially different vocabulary, because it's called vocabulary. So I would use this as much as possible. So if you want to extend your learning, this is a great resource. Great, great resource. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. So which vocabulary words did you hear? Well, I want to review some of those. I heard rivers. Rivers are actually bodies of water that are actually straits. They come from a source and they empty out into another larger body of water. And I also heard a definition for lakes. Now, a lake is a body of water that's surrounded on all sides by land, different than an island, right? It's the exact opposite of an island. And we're going to be talking about some of the major lakes in the United States. So here's a picture of a lake down here. I also heard some information about mountain ranges, and it said that mountain ranges are usually chains that are connected. So when one mountain is connected to another, they form a chain, and then we have mountain ranges. And then lastly, oceans. We have several oceans, and oceans actually was not mentioned in this video, but it's important that we talk about the 5 oceans of the world, excuse me. But specifically, there are 2 oceans that we here in the United States can be impacted by in terms of our weather patterns, but also in terms of just enjoyment, going to the beach. And those would be the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Now, rivers and lakes. I know you're probably thinking, what's the difference between a river and a lake? They're both bodies of water. They can't be very different. Well, as I just explained, we know that a lake is surrounded on all sides by land. Whereas when we have rivers, in this example, we're looking at the major rivers in the United States. They are coming from one source, and then they empty out usually into larger bodies of water. Most of our rivers flow downstream. So they flow downstream, usually from a higher level of elevation, and then they flow downstream and empty out into our oceans. So here on this map, you see some of the major rivers. So we have the Columbia River, the Colorado River, the Rio Grande River, the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, and the Hudson River. Not to mention the Yukon River. Now, many of you might not have heard of the Yukon River, but the Yukon River is actually located in Alaska, and it's a major river in Alaska. So it's considered one of our rivers because Alaska is part of the United States. All right, and over here, let's look over here. We're looking at the Great Lakes. These are the major lakes in the United States. So we have Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. And I can tell you that these lakes are huge. I've seen them for myself. I've actually not seen all of them, but I've been to Lake Ontario. And when I went to Lake Ontario, it was so huge, I couldn't see land on the other side. To some people, when they come upon Lake Ontario, they might think it's a beach. It's like a huge ocean. And it is not an ocean, it's a lake, but it is a gigantic lake. And again, I could not see with my eyes, the naked eye, I could not see the other side of the lake. So that's how large it is. All right. Now, physical features of the United States. The main features that we're going to be talking about when we really talk about some of the other physical features are mountain chains. And if you look at this map, this is actually a physical map of the United States. It shows in green all the lowland areas of the United States. It also shows our plains with this lighter green, yellowish gradation. And then it shows, in coloring, and then it shows our mountain ranges in brown. So our two major mountain ranges are shown here. We have the Appalachian Mountains, which actually goes through Virginia. I've been to the Appalachian Mountains before. And we have the Rocky Mountains. Never been there, but it's on my bucket list. The Rocky Mountains. These are the two largest and major mountain ranges in the United States. And again, this is a physical map. Now, why do I say physical map? We do see some borders of states here, but physical maps usually focus on giving us the geography of a place or showing us how the geography of a place is different. So it shows us where our mountains are, where our lowlands are, things like that. Now, when we talk about political maps focus more on showing us boundaries, political boundaries of places. So states, countries, cities, towns. It shows us where dividers have been created to change from one town to another, or one country to another, or one state to another. And those political boundaries are man-made boundaries. They're not like our physical features, which are things that take thousands and thousands of years to form, like mountains. Mountains don't come up overnight. They take thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years to form. Now, if you look at this map, I just want to focus in on the two major oceans in the United States. So we have the Atlantic Ocean over here to our east, and we have the Pacific Ocean over here to the west coast of the United States. So if I was in Virginia and I went to Virginia Beach, I wish I could go right now, but I can't. What ocean would I be swimming in? I swam in the ocean. Let me think about that. Yep, you guessed it. I would be swimming in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if I went to, let's say, Los Angeles, and I wanted to go to the beach in Los Angeles, and I've actually been to the beach in Los Angeles, and it was awesome. What ocean would I be swimming in? You guessed it, it would be the Pacific Ocean. So it's important that we understand how to orient ourselves. Last week, you talked about the geography of Virginia, and Virginia will be right here. You notice this map doesn't have political boundaries. It doesn't focus on that. It doesn't focus on dividing us into states. It gives us some of the geography, so showing us those lowlands, some of the higher elevation spots in the United States, but it doesn't focus on dividing into states. It does give us some symbols to show us where our major cities are, but it doesn't divide the map into states. But it's important that we orient ourselves here in Virginia to the Atlantic Ocean and understand that the ocean that we're closest to is the Atlantic Ocean. If we were on the West Coast, the ocean that we will be closest to is the Pacific Ocean. And then all of these areas out here in the middle of the country aren't near an ocean at all. So they have to travel pretty far to get to an ocean. All right. So maps change over time. And I think that this is an important topic for us to discuss. When we think about political boundaries of a place, our maps and our political boundaries can change over time. In fact, if I really wanted them to, they could change overnight. If I was a lawmaker and I decided that part of the city of Richmond is no longer part of the city of Richmond, it's now part of Henrico, that can be a change that can take place overnight. However, our physical features, the physical geography of a place cannot change usually overnight, unless there's something, that happens that is catastrophic, like a hurricane or that erodes away land, or an earthquake that might shake up the land and change the land, but it wouldn't change it so drastically that we would have major, major, major physical changes overnight. So When we look at this map, this is a map that was actually drawn in 1688. And this is what British North America looked like back then. So this is a map that shows us the Carolinas. At that time, it wasn't North and South Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. This is part of what the British North America looked like at that time. Now, we know that over time, our country has grown and it's a lot bigger, and no longer are we British North America, we are the United States of America. But this is what it would have looked like back in the 1600s. Now, if we go a step further, and this is a map that was called Nouvelle de la Caroline by Robert Morden from 1688. And I got that from the Library of Congress. But if we go a step further, let's look at these next two maps. And this is actually another map that came from the Library of Congress. This shows how by the late 1700s, the boundaries of the United States had changed dramatically. So if you notice, we've gone from just being over here in the very, very eastern part of the United States to expanding now past the Appalachian Mountains. And the Appalachian Mountains would be about here and in this area. And we're now expanding to the middle part of the United States or into the plains. Not quite there yet, but we're expanding further and further. So if you see there are more colonies that have been added on, well, by that time we were states that have been added on. There are actual territories to the north. So the United States had begun to grow. Now, here's another map. This shows, this is actually a census map. It shows what the United States looked like before and after the Louisiana Purchase. So again, here we have the United States before in 1790. And this is right around the end of the American Revolution, right at the end of the American Revolution after it had ended. And now what it looks like post Louisiana Purchase. So we still have this area that's controlled by the United States, but if you notice, now the Louisiana Territory is part of the United States. We also have this area down here that is part of the United States. So it has changed drastically, and pretty much if you look at the size, it's pretty much double. But if you see out here, this area is still controlled by Spain. So places like in parts of Texas and out in California, these were all areas that were controlled by the Spanish. But it just shows you that how in 10 years, an area can change. And all that is based on political boundaries. These were two countries that were fighting over control of a territory. And as one area ceded or took control of an area, that area then changes and the boundaries change. And now it's part of a totally different country. All right, map of the United States in the 1860s. So now we've gone about 60 years out. And if you look at the United States, look how much it has expanded. There are so many states that have been added and more territories. And all of this area over here that was once part of Spain is no longer part of Spain. It has basically been, and we could get into a much deeper and lengthier conversation about how that happened, but it has been acquired, which is the word that I'm going to use, acquired by the United States by 1860. And this kind of leads us into the Civil War. Now, let's practice. All right, so we've learned a lot. We've learned about the difference between a political map and political boundaries that are created by people and by man. They're man-made boundaries, but we also talked about physical features and physical maps, and that shows us mountain ranges and lowlands, plains. It can show us where rivers are, where lakes are. So the difference between those two boundaries. We've also talked about some important geographical terms, lakes, rivers, the difference between those two. We know that a lake starts off at one source and it flows to a larger source of water. A river, I apologize, starts at one point and it flows into a larger body of water. And rivers usually have land on two sides. Lakes are actually totally surrounded by land. So that will be the difference between those two. We also talked about mountain ranges or chains of mountains that are connected one mountain to the next. And we also talked about oceans and the two oceans that are located closest to the United States, which are the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west. So let's practice. What are the major mountain ranges located in the United States? Think about that. Maybe you've taken some notes and jotted it down. I'll give you a minute. You guessed it. The Rocky Mountain Range and the Appalachian Mountain Range. Good job. Can you name the Great Lakes? Can you name all of them? There are 5 of them: Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, and Lake Erie. Name the major rivers in the United States. That's right, boys and girls. The Columbia River, the Mississippi River, the Colorado River, the Hudson River, the Rio Grande River, and the Yukon River. How has the United States changed over time? Now, this is more of an open-ended question. There really isn't a right and wrong answer, but there's definitely an answer that can be substantiated by evidence, and probably answers that, of course, cannot be substantiated by evidence. But based upon what we saw on the maps that we analyzed and looked at, we can tell that the United States has definitely grown over time. Have the geographical features changed much? Not really, but what has changed a lot? Our boundaries, our states, the size of our country has changed a lot over time. All right, so Thursday's mission. What is our mission for Thursday? So on Thursday, we need to have a few things. I would like you to have paper, crayons and markers, pencils, of course, your thinking caps, your smiles, and your willingness to learn. But I want you to answer these questions. If you could visit one of the places that we discussed today, where would you go and why? This is a really timely question because I know a lot of us right now are feeling closed in and might just want to be able to go to the mall or the movies. But let's think bigger than that. Where would you go? I know right now if I could go anywhere, I might want to go to California. I happen to love California. It's one of my favorite states in the United States. So I might want to go there. I want you to research that place and create a travel brochure or advertisement enticing people to visit. It can be a brochure, it could be a poster. Use your imagination. Maybe it's a postcard. Maybe you're writing a postcard to a friend or a family member, telling them about your trip to this specific destination and how much you enjoy it and how great it would be if they visited as well. So I want you to think about that. What would be a great way to do that? And then the bonus, are there any areas in your neighborhood that have changed over time? If so, how has it changed? Have there been parks that have been created in your neighborhood? Have schools been built in your neighborhood recently? Have there been buildings that have been torn down? Maybe somebody's gotten rid of some trees that were really important to your neighborhood. How has your neighborhood or your area, maybe even just your block, your building, how has it changed over time? I want you to talk about that, and you're going to share this information with us on Flipgrid. I would like you to submit your work, and all that's going to entail is you just kind of holding your work up, maybe giving me a 1 to 2 sentences about what you created and why. So I want to hear from you. I want you to submit your work using the Flipgrid code linked below, and you can actually click it and go directly to this Flipgrid. And I want you to make sure that you include your first name, your grade, your school, and your teacher's name, because we want to shout you out next week. I would love to be able to shout out all of the students who shared their work with us. I would also love to be able to send some shout outs to Superintendent Cameras and tell him to shout out these students because they're doing excellent work as young historians. So we want to shout you out. So make sure you work hard, you submit your work using the Flipgrid link, and I can't wait to see the wonderful work that you create. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.